Chapter 16 Reunion. Tension ran through Rakan's limbs as he slowed to a stop. His hand moved instinctively to the pommel of his sword as he turned his head, listening carefully. He heard the footsteps of his companions slow as they noticed his abrupt stop. Somewhere squirrels chattered to one another frivolously. Two pairs of footsteps approached them not far behind. Rakan allowed himself to relax. The steps were even and confident, seemingly not trying to approach them in secret. That boded well for their intentions. "Hail, who goes there?" Rakan called out. The two footsteps hesitated for a moment, but soon a pair of figures emerged from amongst the trees. To Rakan's surprise, he saw Urug standing before them, accompanied by a woman that he did not recognize. The situation struck Rakan as entirely strange. Though the half-dash had shown sparks of loyalty, he had given them no reason to believe that he would return unbidden to their group, having already left. "Urug?" Rakan asked. The half-dash simply nodded. His female companion looked at him as if expecting an introduction, then stepped forward herself. "I am Kiran of the Hand of Fire," she bowed. "I am pleased to make your acquaintance." The three of them introduced themselves in turn. Rakan eyed the two of them, trying to decide which of his many questions he should ask first. "Kiran, was it? How is it that you came across Urug here? What purpose have you now in accompanying him?" Tension filled the air as Rakan recalled the recent demise of Peleus. He wondered if Urug had shared this information with her. "I found Urug while in search of my guardian Peleus, who I have been informed has passed. I saved Urug from a wild mountain bear," Urug scoffed at the statement, "and saw fit to accompany him back to you." Rakan turned his attention to Urug. "Well, I guess the next question I have is, why have you come back to us? I would think you would prize your newfound freedom." For a moment, Urug remained silent, staring thoughtfully at the forest floor. "Peleus died so I could live. I feel bound now to see through the goals that would have been his had he lived. My people have no honor to speak of, yet I feel myself bound to the honor of my human kindred." A tangible sense of shock seemed to hang in the air at that. Rakan actually saw Belethor start in surprise at that unexpected declaration. Peleus was right, Rakan thought. It seemed clear to him now that there was potential in Urug, just as the Magi had said. At that moment, Rakan made it his intention to treat Urug like he would any fellow man. "Well, Urug," Rakan said, "then it seems time I invited you properly to our company. Do you wish to join us as an equal, making our goals your own?" Rakan offered his hand out to Urug. The half-dash looked at it with a confused expression, unclear of what he was supposed to do. After a moment's hesitation, Urug reached up and took his hand, and Rakan shook it. Nolendil's heart was immediately warmed when the walls of Halmair finally came into view. Unlike men, the Magi built their walls and buildings without felling a single tree. Instead, they formed the trees as they grew, shaping them to suit their needs. Thus, the walls of Halmair were made of hundreds of trees growing interlocked together, forming an archway at the entrance. Nolendil could remember in his youth centuries ago when the trees were but saplings. He wondered what would become of their old ways now that magic was fading away. Now that the trees were full grown, far fewer sentries patrolled the wall. Still, two stood proudly in full dress armor to greet the company as they approached. No gate barred the way into Halmair. Instead, the last few yards of the road leading into the great Magi city were lined with trees of increasing height, ropes tied to their branches so that they could be pulled together to bar the way in extreme circumstances. The two soldiers bowed gracefully as the company dismounted their horses to approach the entryway. "Greetings, soldiers. I am Nolendil of the Hand of Fire. We have come a long way to seek refuge, and hoping to meet with our allies." "Greetings, Nolendil," the soldier to his left said. "We welcome you with open arms to our great halls. You, as well as your allies, come expected. Rakan has met with the leader, and he has called together a great council to consider dire matters. Most other nations have yet to arrive. Shall I lead you to the dining hall? It is likely that the others are now eating." Joy flooded Nolendil at the prospect of Magi-prepared food. It had been far too long since he had eaten something prepared properly. "If you would be so kind, I think it would be quite agreeable." The guard motioned his hand, calling for a nearby messenger. This messenger bowed low and motioned for the group to follow, even as stable hands approached to take their horses. As they walked down the busy pathways that ran between the large tree dwellings of Halmair, Nolendil wondered how long it had been since he had last been amongst his people. For decades now he had lived in the barracks of the Hand of Fire, though he spent far more time traveling than he did there. Singing came from the windows of the homes as the sun began to dip low in the sky. Shadows grew longer in the air, and the air sweeter, as the Magi welcomed the end of day in song. Nolendil watched with fond familiarity as the fireflies roused from their nests and began to dance in the streets, entranced by the magical melodies. Only Mireth remained silent as Nolendil and his other companions added their voice to the evening song in their native tongue. The sun shall leave from now till dawn, our hearts shall slow their beat. Our rest starts now, our revelry shall come from our lungs. My dears, let's dance with all our might and bid the sun farewell. Where it goes now we do not know, but bless the land it sees. Soon they came to the great dining hall in the midst of the great city. Music drifted from the halls, coming from a variety of strings and trumpets. All manner of instruments filled the air as they entered the great doors and beheld the sights within. Candlelight danced from the myriad candles that filled the tables and lined the walls. Sounds of mirth and laughter brought a smile to Nolendil's face as he spotted a table full of people he recognized. At the head of the table sat Rickon, his eyes alight with happiness that Nolendil had not seen there before. To his right and left sat Dervish and Belethor, surrounded each of them with drained glasses. To Nolendil's surprise, these were joined by a woman that he recognized, but he had not expected here. Kiran sat with them, though her features seemed uncharacteristically stoic to his eyes. Nolendil's heart froze and his jaw dropped as a far more surprising guest caught his eyes. Seated beside Kiran was none other than the half-desh captain that they had taken captive at the start of their journey. Why does he travel with them? Why have they not killed him or set him loose? The half-desh sat there refusing to meet anyone's eyes, dressed in a man's traveling clothes. He was hardly recognizable from their first meeting, but Nolendil hadn't forgotten his markings that could pass as a genuine scar. He took a deep breath, letting his hands relax and unclench. Halmair was not the proper place to lose control. He began to approach the table, scanning the room for signs of Lier Conan, the closest thing that Halmair had to a queen. Nolendil found her in the center of the feast hall, at her own table stacked high with food, as was the custom. "Ah, Nolendil and Lycian," Rickon called as they approached his table. "We've been waiting for you." Nolendil nodded at the man. "It is good to see that you've made it to us back alive. Did you see Malsheth? Is there cause for alarm?" Rickon's face took on sudden somberness. "It's hard to keep memory of your troubles in such a place of peace. I had nearly forgotten in our waiting. There is cause for alarm, Nolendil. Far more than we had ever expected." "Far more?" Nolendil said, alarmed. "How many Desh have gathered?" "They are at least 10,000 strong, Nolendil. We were lucky most of us got out alive." Most of us? Nolendil thought. His eyes widened at the realization of a glaring absence at their table. Peleus was not among them. His heart pounded as he glanced at Kiran, noting once more the bleakness of her composure. "Peleus didn't make it," Rickon said. Suddenly the revelry around Nolendil seemed bittersweet. His heart was heavy at the joy on display as it contrasted the great loss that he felt. Peleus was the Hand of Fire. Every member had been recruited by him, and all of its statutes and beliefs were written by his hand. What would become of their group without a leader? Nolendil was still reeling from the revelation when the half-dash rose to his feet unbidden. Searing illogical hatred joined the milieu of emotion swirling around in Nolendil's head. He wanted desperately to leap across the table and lash out in anger. To his surprise, the creature suddenly bowed low to all of them. "It is my fault," the half-dash said. "Peleus died defending me. A foolish sacrifice, but I will make it right. I wish to give myself to you in service, to do with whatever you want." All of them stood silently as the music and laughter of the meal hall continued all around them. Nolendil closed his eyes for a moment, unable to process all that had just happened. Tens of thousands of Desh were gathered ready to assault the world. Peleus was dead, and the fate of the Hand of Fire was in question. Still, the crowds rejoiced. Nolendil's hands clenched into fists anew. "Your service? I'd rather your head, foul creature." Even as he spoke the words, he regretted them. Nolendil braced himself for the half-dash to attack, but to his surprise the thing merely looked down in shame. "That's not yours to say," Kiran said as she stood to her feet. On her face she wore a fierce look of determination where before there had been grave depression. She lifted an envelope up for them to see. Peleus has appointed me his successor as the leader of the Hand of Fire. Urg has pledged himself to the service of this cause, and I have accepted his offer." Nolendil sat down in a chair at the table, unable to stand any longer. Chiron, the new leader? He thought to himself. I have been a member of the Hand of Fire longer than she has been alive. Still, that was Peleus's wish, and far be it from him to deny the wishes of the dead. Nolendil took a deep breath and steadied himself. So be it. "So what now?" Hadamir asked softly. "I have called a council," Rakan said. "What am I doing here?" Mireth wondered to herself as the great kings and leaders of the free peoples gathered around the stone table before her. She hadn't even been to Malsheth, nor did she have companions to call for the war effort. Still she had been invited, and one hardly denied the request of the Lier of the Magi. Mireth felt self-conscious when she looked around at the stately dress of all the rest gathered there. King Erigil wore shining steel armor inlaid with an intricate design of a great tower on his chestplate. A deep purple cape rested on his shoulders, a golden rope hiding the seam where it met the plate of his armor. Upon his head was a golden crown, a single opal standing at its center, surrounded by gemstones of all colors. Lier Conan was far more reserved in dress, though her forest green robe appeared to be made of fine silk. She wore no crown upon her head, but was instead set apart from her peers by strange tattoos marking her forehead. Mireth thought they were likely magi words. Similarly, the Dweller King Darunt wore simple brown clothing, though his crown was opulent. It stood twice as high as Erigil's, and was fitted with so many jewels that the gold beneath was scarcely visible. Her companions, too, were dressed in their finest, but Mireth had no dress clothes. Instead, she came in her traveling clothes. She had spent the morning trying in vain to remove stains that had been there for ages. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Their war council was taking a long time to come together. Mireth turned her attention to the table before her, amazed by its design. Upon the table was a map of sorts that showed the landscape of Cosmea. Rather than lines drawn to represent the trees and mountains, the very stone was shaped to match the landscape. Before her eyes, trees of stone stood at the foot of miniature mountains. Great cities rose from the plains. Mireth wondered how often they updated the landscape of the cities as they grew. She knew that this must have been created by magic arts. She wondered how it was maintained now that magic was so scarce. The idle chatter was quickly silenced as Lier Conan stood to her feet and held her hands aloft to those gathered. For a moment the room remained entirely silent as she simply looked up toward the ceiling. Mireth wondered why she was doing that. "My friends, we are here today under dire circumstances. It has been brought to our attention that Master Caden's fears were indeed founded on truth. A great force of Desh, as has not been seen since ancient times, gathers at the old fortress of Malsheth against us." The Lier motioned towards the spine of the mountains on the map before her. "For this reason, as was laid down in the war pact decades ago set down by King Erigil, we must join forces as allies. We meet now to hear the testimony of those sent to investigate, as well as to decide on where our forces shall rally. Once we have heard the testimony and we have chosen a destination, those gathered will be asked if there is any other information deemed tactically relevant." Lier Conan sat gracefully in her chair and motioned her hand to where Rakan was seated, arms folded on the table before him. "Specialist Rakan, you have been chosen as a representative for the reconnaissance party." Rakan stood and bowed to the assembly, looking regal himself in his own way. Mireth listened intently as he recounted his experiences at Malsheth, detailing the number and composure of the forces that awaited there. He spoke with expertise on their lack of military discipline, but lamented at their sheer numbers. He spoke also of the strange ghostly creatures that could destroy weapons at will. Mireth shivered as she remembered her own encounter with such creatures. Tension was visible among the gathered leaders as Rakan bowed and seated himself anew. Likely they were loath to admit that war was upon them. The room remained silent for a moment as the leaders considered his words. After a few minutes passed, King Erigil lifted his sword and placed it on the table, indicating his intention to speak. Lier Conan, as host of the meeting, nodded her permission. "I move that we gather in Broken Fields, just east of the capital of my kingdom. Provides an open space great enough to gather our combined forces, as well as a battlefield near enough for my siege weapons to be brought." Three leaders lifted their left hand, the sign that they agreed. To Mireth's surprise, Chiron joined them in raising her left hand. It appeared that the Hand of Fire was of great reputation if their leader stood shoulder to shoulder with the kings and Lier. Counterclockwise, beginning with Lier Conan, the leaders stood to pledge what number of their armies they were willing to commit to the cause. There was a heavy weight in the room as each leader pledged the entirety of their respective forces. After this, Elysian requested and was granted the floor. My friends, it has become apparent that these forces have at their disposal strange creatures that can with ease destroy the weapons of their enemies. At great effort we have come across an enchantment. He placed a great black tome on the table in front of him, which I believe provides the means to protect our weapons. While time-consuming and difficult, I propose that the weapons of all the gathered armies be equipped with these enchantments, lest we be disarmed and destroyed. The leaders lifted their left hands. After a moment of silence, Lier Conan stepped to her feet. If there is no other information to be shared, then I move to dismiss the council. The leaders lifted their left hands. Very well. This meeting is adjourned. Go now and prepare your forces immediately. With solemn hearts and confident hands, we march to war. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what you would do if you were at a war council with the kings of all the free peoples. Till next time.